clock on the wall tells us it's time for another episode of Learn, Teach, Lead, where we explore how educators, just like you, are using innovative instructional strategies, including how to leverage AI to improve teaching and learning.
Each week, we share real classroom stories, tools, and tips to help you save time, personalize instruction, and lead with confidence.
I'm Janine Nostrom, an elementary school principal.
And I'm Robin D'Angelo, an elementary school teacher. Let's get started with today's Friday debrief.
All right, Robin, why don't you tell us about our fabulous moment of the week?
Last week, our power move was ways to look for initial ways to gather data. We spent some time during the week gathering information from teachers as well as looking at our student data. We ran some of our initial assessments through different large language models and reflected on what areas we can grow in our curriculum and instruction that allow opportunities for further development.
That's right. And last week, Robin introduced the GROW acronym, which outlines the cycle that we're using here to continually improve student outcomes. As you'll recall, GROW stands for G, gather information, R, refocus, O, organize, and W, watch students succeed. So in line with our goal of gathering information, we've invited two very special guests to join us today who have also been working hard in this area of gathering information. So we're happy to welcome Ms. Christine Chiaramonte, our reading specialist and literacy coach here at the ranch, and Mrs. Suzanne Barbi, the principal at Parkway School. Welcome, ladies. We're happy to have you with us today. So why don't we move right into our small shifts that are creating big ripples? Go ahead, Robin.
Absolutely. We'd like to begin with our small shifts, big ripple segment of our podcast today with Ms. Chiaramonte, who will share with us how she led the 3rd and 4th grade teachers at Ridge Ranch School to reflect on gaps and opportunities that they observed from their most recent experience giving the NJSLA and the professional discussion that she facilitated, which can serve as a model for others who may wish to have similar conversations at their schools.
And then we'll have Mrs. Barbi share with us her initiative that she's leading at her school to have her teachers reinvigorate their informal conferring notes and other informal assessment measures to promote thoughtful kid watching and gain a more thorough understanding of how their students learn and progress.
Sounds amazing. Ms. Chiaramonte, why don't you start by telling us a little more about the work that you spearheaded at the ranch this week?
Certainly. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to participate. As Ridge Ranch's reading specialist, I teach strategies to groups of readers to help them grow in literacy and reach their potential. I also devise plans and strategies to help the school grow as a whole in the area of literacy. As a result, this past summer, when I was thinking about the upcoming school year and areas on which to focus, one that came to mind is the NJSLA. I knew from the release scores that the students did very well. So instead of focusing on one change that needed to happen to bring up scores as a whole, I thought, let's all gather to determine where there are present gaps that aren't as obvious and where there might be gaps in the future so we could prevent them from occurring. In order to obtain that type of information, it is best to meet with every professional who is involved. So Ms. Nostrom and I invited all 3rd and 4th grade teachers to share their thoughts and concerns. With all of us working and discussing together, we were able to record gaps and solutions to fill those gaps. This way, from the very beginning of the year, we are able to maximize targeted instructional opportunities. Our plan for the future is to implement our solutions and then meet again to determine if we need to tweak them or identify new gaps that need to be filled.
Just to kind of follow up, one of the things that I really loved about the session that you ran with the teachers was the fact that it wasn't asking them to drill down in necessarily into the content standards, saying like which particular area did they have trouble with? Did they have trouble with fractions? Did they have trouble with inferential questions? I mean, we knew a lot of that from the reports that we get from NJSLA, but it was the other things that they noticed, like the technology skills. Like, can you name a few of the things that just trying off the top of my head to remember? What were some of the areas that the teachers identified?
So I started off first with this slideshow, including some gaps that I thought of initially. I had also met with one of the teachers and had shared this idea, and she had told me a couple of gaps, so I included them. And they included, for example, the fact that since we're trying not to have students spend too much time on screens, that anticipating there would be a slower typing rate in the future. So how can we take care of that now or make a plan for the whole year? In addition to that, I had also anticipated that reading the digital text and working with the digital text would be a gap for teachers who made grade level changes and were new to their positions. So from the teachers and, from myself, there were different gaps that, we came up with. And I think it's a good starting point because it allows you to work globally at first and then to narrow in. And sometimes, when you're starting off a school year, it involves, less pressure and demand on the teachers to start that way.
And I love that it's proactive and not reactive, right? So we're starting proactively already. And I love that it comes full circle, Christine, because as a teacher, I focus a lot on the student data as well as my reflection, but looking at it as a whole of the whole teacher and how we're going to approach it as, teachers in the classroom to get to that of, student data really, it does make us feel like that sense of, we can do this, we're in this together. So thank you for having that meeting.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm glad it was well received. And the fact that we're working as a team, because one gap in one area could have a ripple effect to others. And I think also the teachers feel as though they're problem solvers right from the beginning of the school year, which also has a ripple effect.
And another thing that occurred to me is that in a way we were kind of getting in our own way. For example, we had said to the kids, no more Chromebooks going home, right? We thought that was developmentally appropriate. We don't want kids having too much screen time. No more Chromebooks during lunchtime. All of that, carryover from COVID, we were done with, right? We want them talking to each other. We want them, engaged in screen-free activities. But that takes away valuable time for them to practice keyboarding. And then they have less time reading text on a screen. And that's a major demand. So I thought the teachers came up with some really good ideas of, okay, if we're not going to allow them, to take their Chromebooks home, maybe we pick a night once a week that is, typing practice and the Chromebooks go home. Of course, we're going to outsmart the kids, right? We're going to have the Chromebooks go home each class on a different night. So they're not, emailing each other at night. But it's just, stepping back a little bit and thinking about how can we fill this gap and still, maintain the I guess the new rules that we have put in place regarding Chromebook use. So.
And then in addition to that, the something like that we need to kind of tackle as a whole because it's brand new. Right. But other gaps might be present for some teachers, but maybe not for other teachers because they've already found ways to, solve those problems. But if we don't come together as a whole and talk and, kind of unpack what we've all been doing and get on the same page, then that's a gap. So it's also just bringing us together and, helping each other out in, the same area.
Right. And then the teachers had also mentioned that the kids were having a lot of trouble with some of the questions that required manipulation of tools on the screen, drag and drop, the two-part questions, things like that. And then when we ran the data through ChatGPT and we were examining just the NJSLA data that came back, we saw that, yes, indeed, it was some of those evidence-based questions that maybe had a part A and a part B. It was the fractions and measurement, which tends to have more tools that the kids have to manipulate online. So, there were some clues there as to areas that we might teach into. So, Mrs. Barbi, I'd love to talk with you a little bit because I know you've been working very hard with your teachers on gathering information from informal assessment measures. And I love the term you use, kid watching. So if you could tell us a little bit from your perspective, from a leadership perspective, as to how you're exploring this with your teachers at Parkway School.
Sure. Thanks for having me. When we began this work, I was thinking a lot this summer about how kid watching, ever since COVID, I think teachers have been reticent about getting next to kids, initially for health reasons, and then just through sort of not getting back into that routine. So my focus this year was to kid watch everywhere, get back into that good conferencing, throughout all the curricular areas, not just in literacy. And what I really thought about was we put a lot of onus on the classroom teachers to be the be all and end all. So it wasn't just that I was focusing on classroom teachers. I was thinking about what adults in my building belong with which children when a child's struggling with certain things. And I love the idea that it's not that the child is struggling, it's that we're struggling to meet the needs of the child. So in order to know what strategies to use with a child who's stuck, and we're stuck on that child, is first take notes and then find the adult in the building that has the expertise to help us get that child unstuck and move forward. So we're doing a lot of work in teams where I call it think tanks, where a variety, like the speech teacher will meet with some of the third grade teachers as well as our OT, and we'll talk about some of the data that we're collecting, and then what are some really easy solutions that we can get from other experts, and are there other people in the building that can help target that practice for that child and not have the onus always be on the classroom teacher.
I love that shift in perspective. It's not the child who's stuck. It's the teachers who are stuck in, addressing their needs. That's a meaningful shift. Thank you for sharing that. And did your teachers share like any, renewed techniques or thoughts about how they were going to collect this data on kids when you were meeting with them? I know it's September, so that's our big focus, right? The beginning of the year.
I think what the first faculty meeting we've shifted all our faculty meetings now to professional development. So everyone comes and I make it an hour. And I said, we all putting everything aside and just being learners. So our first session was all about everyone brought kid watching notes. And we looked at the notes that they had, and we thought about it through three lenses: academic, social emotional, and engagement. Because we're finding that a lot of our students' issue is actually engagement. It's not that they can't do it, it's that they don't want to do it sometimes. And we're trying to unlock the why don't want to do it, because the easiest fix, quite honestly, is the academic one. When they don't know how to do a skill and then we teach it to them and they're able to do it, but it's harder when it's about, I want to look out the window and not do the work, So we have, I don't know if you know, Jennifer Saravello has a wonderful engagement. Wait, what is it called? Hold on. The engagement inventory that a lot of my teachers, one of them brought it to the table, and a lot of the teachers were like, oh, I want that, because you watch the kids every 5 minutes and see who's engaging, who's not engaging. So it's a really powerful tool. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, no, you definitely did. I think that's great.
And I also, if I could just chime in for a minute, I love the fact that, our district is such a team-oriented district, and just to have that team perspective of it's not just you are making all these big decisions, you're making them as a community of learners and teachers and, experts. And just to have that extra pair of eyes on the students, like you can just collect so much more information on that and talk, about this information to find that solution. So it's not just you in your head saying, oh my gosh, I'm a teacher. Oh, I don't have the answer. What do I do? It's you have your community of professionals to lean on. And as teachers, that's super important, to have that support system from your administrators and your, your teachers and your counselors, so I love that, the faculty meeting being a PD and learning opportunity for them.
We're grounding it all in the standards too. So we're thinking about what standard is it that this child is getting in this child's way, or what is it we're trying to get them to the next level. So that's the piece that I feel like we've always looked through these lenses, but never to tie it to, and how do we get them to grade level standards. So that's a big critical piece of the puzzle that I think is giving us all pause in this work, and we're all learning it together.
And it reminds me of what I did a lot last year with pausing, looking at the data that I assessed, the formative data in my class, right? Mm-hmm. And the summative data, and then looked at it and refocused my, targeted instruction to then progress monitor, the next step in their learning process. And it almost is, you're doing the same thing, but full circle with social, emotional, behavioral, and academics all piled on top of one in order to make, that difference in that, child's progress.
And I love the fact that it's not just the classroom teacher, or maybe the reading teacher, or the basic skills teacher. It's everyone, right? You have your PE teachers, your music teachers. Everybody is taking these anecdotal notes on the kids and, sharing information. So I think that's great. So I guess that's a great segue into the instructional spotlight here. I have this long commute home, and I'm thinking about a lot of different things on the way home. And it all kind of dovetails nicely with what we've just been talking about, because when we think about data, we're often thinking about student performance scores, assessments, progress monitoring tools, all of those things. But one of the most powerful sources of data that we have is the insight that comes from our teachers and their expertise. So admittedly, one of the reasons that we started this Learn, Teach, Lead was because we wanted to unpack how AI might help with assessments and data interpretation. And certainly, AI does a good job with that. It can help sort information, it can categorize, it can highlight patterns and save us time and give us a head start when we analyze data. But what AI can't do is it can't replicate what a teacher sees in the classroom. It can't notice if a student has, subtle frustrations, if a student is fatiguing. It can't notice if a student is ripping apart an eraser because they're so nervous with test anxiety. All of that is only something that a teacher can observe in the classroom. And I think it's those kinds of insights through daily practice and careful observations that really enhance kid watching and make our anecdotal records and conferring notes so important. And so this year, we were very intentional about asking our teachers to identify what students struggled with on the NJSLA. And their responses did give us a richer understanding of the challenges that the kids experienced when taking the test. It wasn't always the content that was the barrier. Sometimes it was technology for taking an online test. And at other times, it was actually just stamina or persistence. So by gathering information or gathering data from teachers, we gained access to a different kind of evidence that you can't get from running the data through AI. AI doesn't have professional judgment. AI isn't able to observe trends across the classroom, and it certainly doesn't understand the day-to-day experiences that highlight the why behind student behaviors. So we can use this valuable information that we get from teachers to guide us as we design supports, as we adjust instruction, and as we shape professional development. So for example, a student data might show a dip in performance on certain writing tasks, while teacher insight might reveal that the student was rushing because they weren't accustomed to typing for an extended period of time. So this dual lens of AI plus teacher expertise helps us focus on what matters most, which is removing barriers so students can demonstrate what they truly know and can do. So talking with teachers about methods and the frequency of gathering data, as Mrs. Barbi is doing at her school, also models the kind of reflective practice that we want our students to adopt. And we need this kind of nuanced data to help refocus our instruction. More about refocusing next week. And as school leaders, we're asking teachers for input, not just about gathering information, but to build a culture where professional expertise is valued as much as the test scores. So I have to say, as much as I value AI and the way that it can handle some of the heavy lifting for our teachers, it can never replace teacher observations and expertise. Reflecting on this week and on my conversations with staff and on the conversations that we've had here, I'm reminded why the teacher has an irreplaceable role. And that is one of the central beliefs, and it's at the heart of our Learn, Teach, Lead podcast. Okay, so Robin, why don't you tell us what our power move for the week is?
Well, looking at how we're going to gather data, both as the human in the loop, as the teacher in the classroom, the most important one, and the use of some AI models, our power move will be to ask a few questions to our students of what they felt was hard this week, what they felt distracted them this week, or what they felt was manageable this week. Because as teachers, that could open barriers that scores don't always show.
Yeah, that's great. I love that, asking students for their reflections. That's a great power move. And my power move challenge for everyone is to just watch your students as they're taking assessments and take some notes. Very simple. Notice some of their testing habits, maybe pacing, stamina, use of technology, signs of fatigue. What do you see as the student is taking a test? And our tip of the week this week is to remove student names from your informal assessment notes and then run them through your favorite LLM and ask it to look for trends, patterns, or any other noticings that would give you insights into next steps for your instruction. Why not? Try a few different LLMs and see if you get different outputs generated based on your notes.
And our teaser for next week, which you will not want to miss, ready? The R in grow. How do we now go to the next step where we gather the data using AI, using teachers in the classroom, using our observations, and now how do we use that to impactfully refocus and target our instruction for our student success? So tune in next week.
Yep, I'm looking forward to it. And a big thank you to our two expert guests, Ms. Christine Chiaramonte and Mrs. Suzanne Barbi. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, folks, that old clock on the wall tells us it's time to wrap up another episode of Learn, Teach, Lead. We've shared a few lessons, unpacked a few stories, and maybe sparked a few new ideas for your classroom or your leadership journey.
As always, we hope you'll take what you've learned, teach it forward, and lead with purpose. Thanks for spending part of your week with us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.